What is up, amigos? Today we have the aerodynamics of a Velociraptor, and I looked up how big these things were, and surprisingly there isn't really a consensus on how big they were. They kind of say that they were like the size of turkeys, but they range from like 10 pounds up to 100 pounds, and no one really knows how big they were. Considering that we have fossils, that's a little bit surprising. Anyway, we have the aerodynamics here of a Velociraptor, and we have different cut planes downstream, and I can tell you that the drag coefficient of this thing was pretty damn good. It was 0.39, which I guess is why ancient cavemen decided to ride them as horses. And we can see why we have such a good aerodynamic drag because, for example, the tail. In these cut planes, you can see it takes up pretty much the entire wake, so after the tail there's almost no wake because it is so streamlined. Then behind its rear legs and underneath the tail, the wake gets sucked up very quickly, so there's almost no wake, and you can see it's very steady, so it's not moving around very much, which indicates that there's not a lot of like bluff body interactions going on here. It's mostly a streamlined situation. And we have a Y plane going straight through the Velociraptor, and this shows you really why it is so aerodynamically efficient. So you can really see there's only two general wakes, one behind the head, like where the neck is. That could be fixed by lowering the Velociraptor's head, or if like where the human would be sitting to ride it, maybe if like he or she like bent down into that little area to be a bit more streamlined as well. And then behind the Velociraptor's foot, those are really the only two areas that are producing a sizable wake. Everything else is very streamlined. I'm very impressed. Now we have another Y plane, which is just on the edge of the Velociraptor, so like where its hand is and its foot. And the wake is pretty small here, so we're not getting a lot of wake being blown out. That's because these are like two little stick areas that don't really have a lot of like meat to them. So that's why we have such a low drag as well in this area. So it's quite impressive. Now we have a Z plane going straight through the legs and just below the hands. And from a lot of other animals and humans, we know that the legs and hands are really the most like drag producing areas. Even more than bodies, because they are just like little sticks and they often have like wakes that interact with each other. Even in this position, we see there's not a huge wake. You go like one Velociraptor downstream and the wake is almost completely evaporated and it's now almost completely free stream velocity flow happening. Now we have another Z plane slightly higher up, and interestingly, just behind the tail on like the upper part of the screen, there's like this wake that's just standing off of the entire object. I think that's probably due to the wake from the bottom leg zipping up a little bit and not from the tail. I think the tail sort of like directs the flow away from it a little bit because of its shape here. And this Z plane is now just around where the Velociraptor's head is and where like you'd be sitting to ride it around. And we can see why now we have such a small wake in downstream of the Velociraptor. So like where you would be sitting, there is quite a big wake here, but the tail does such a great job of mitigating that wake. Like the wake from the head hits the tail, and then from there it's just a streamlined situation where the flow just continually follows the tail and doesn't separate. I can also say that the lift coefficient of this was only 0.05, so almost nothing. It wasn't too much. So it's fairly neutral in that sense. So that's it in the simulation. If you'd like to, make sure to like it. And if you want to see more like this, click subscribe. And if you want to get better at CFD and or theory yourself, check out our courses, link in the description. And I'll see you next podcast. Peace out, amigos.